Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Silverstone Museum podcast. And today we're going to be talking Canadian Grand Prix. Formula One is back with the Canadian Grand Prix at a classic circuit. And I'm joined by Alastair Dickinson. Alastair, how are you? And are you looking forward to this weekend?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, Canada's one of my favourite Grand Prix of the year. There's a lot of history there. It's a really important track. And to me, it's kind of the start of the proper season. I mean, I feel like the first few rounds are a bit all over the shop, some odd tracks in there. Now it's proper, good circuit, good racing, and yeah, a lot of history there.
Yeah, we've had obviously a fragmented start to the Formula One season caused by the conflict in Iraq. We lost a couple of Grand Prix. There's a lot of talk about them coming back to the end of the program, but I think it's probably too early to predict when those Grand Prix might come back in. I know there's talk of Silverstone, Imola being bought in, all of those other things, but I think until the conflict plays out a little bit longer, we're not really going to know where that goes. But one of the things I want to mention is history. Now, you mentioned the Canadian Grand Prix, and you're absolutely right to mention history. And for me, it's one of the races that's so historically significant. Late 1970s, the circuit started racing, and it became famed very early on with the absolute tragedy of the death of Gilles Villeneuve a couple of weeks before the Canadian Grand Prix. The circuit renamed the Gilles Villeneuve circuit. It still carries that name today. That legendary Ferrari driver, and obviously, you know, for those that will remember, or may not remember, but may have seen things like the Sky documentary and other things. Obviously, Didier Pironi, Villeneuve's great arch rival, had that huge catastrophic accident at the start of that Canadian Grand Prix, just a couple of weeks after Villeneuve's demise, which led to the unfortunate tragedy of Riccardo Paletti in that incident. But the circuit itself has always had that feeling where something different is going to happen, something strange is going to happen. There's been some iconic wins, and I link this to Gilles Villeneuve. And for me, as a small child, watching Jean Alastair win, he's the only Grand Prix he ever ended up winning in that Ferrari in 1995. But it was in that iconic Ferrari red with the 27 in white embossed on the front, Gilles Villeneuve's number. And, you know, you talk to Canadians now, and I'm getting goosebumps, look, literally, as we speak, looking, you know, talking about that. It was such an iconic moment, and you know, that win, and the fact it was the only, and Jean Alastair was the Gilles Villeneuve in waiting, if you like, drove really by the scruff of the neck, and you know, and really took the. I probably should have won more races, but you know, that's for another day. And then, as the history of the race bore on, you know, we have the wall of champions that the likes of Schumacher, Hill, Villeneuve have all hit, you know, the last corner as you come onto the straight. So it gives that wall of champions, gives you that history. We've also had some really classic. Lewis gets his first ever Grand Prix win there. Robert Kubica had that almighty crash and then won his, the following year, won his only Grand Prix. We had that, what was it, 5-odd hour epic that Jenson Button won in 2011 with the rain delay. You also have in Canada the weather and things which play a part, but also the nature of the circuit is on the St. Lawrence Seaway, and there's that Olympic rowing strip behind. And something that I know a couple of us were talking about the other day, which doesn't get talked about enough, there used to be a raft race. So the mechanics used to have a raft race across the St. Lawrence Seaway. And I know you're looking at me strangely now. This is probably something, seriously, go on YouTube and look at these. There's footage of them. And the premise was, it was meant to be fun, that the mechanics, anything you could find in the garage that was surplus to requirements, normally old oil cans and petrol cans, and you may build a raft, and they would like literally canoe race across the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Olympic rowing strip, and it became quite a thing. And one of the teams one year turned up with they didn't have anything to make their canoe with, so took one of the portaloos out the back of the paddock. They literally blocked up the U-bend and things, and off they went in a portaloo. It all got a bit silly when somehow Ferrari found in the back of their garage a canoe or two canoes and bolted an outboard motor to the back, and it all just started getting a bit silly. But it was all good fun, and it does still carry on. There is, I think 2017 was the last one I found of it. It may still carry on. Unfortunately, I don't get the ability to go to the Canadian Grand Prix, but it's all these little things that go on in Canada that give a sense of fun, but also a sense of drama. And I think this weekend it's a sprint race. And we're going to run through some of the teams and some of what we think is going to happen and some of the stories in there. But it does look like Canada is always quite a good race. It's always a little bit unexpected. There's been some great moments there, and certainly one I'm really looking forward to. But I've talked about history enough, but there is potentially, and we're going to jump straight into a particularly famous driver. A potential history-making conversation that is going on that might be announced at the British Grand Prix regarding Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, things like this always happen in these little breaks. I think we've had, 3 weeks between Grand Prix? Something was always going to come up. I mean, the news that Lewis Hamilton might retire and announce it at the British Grand Prix is something I wasn't expecting. I mean, he's not had a great time at Ferrari. I don't think it was everything he wanted it to be. I think we all dreamt that we'd see him winning another world championship in the red of Ferrari, but it just hasn't worked out that way. And I think it'd be a massive, massive loss to the sport. And I think it'll be similar to one of the bigger moments in MotoGP when Rossi left. Obviously, this massive icon, what people come to see leaving, I don't know where that could leave the sport.
If Lewis does retire, and it is a big if, from my point of view, it was always going to be a 2-year project for Ferrari, and unless it was going to be, unless that car was really going to win, it was about the new set of regulations. And I think, you look at Lewis's demeanour this year; he's been in a much better place. You look at the conversations he has with the media. You look at the way he is walking around the paddock. He appears relatively comfortable in himself. And that does make you wonder, well, actually, has he made a decision that this is it and I'm going to go? It would make absolute sense if he was going to retire at the British Grand Prix. He may do what other Ferrari drivers have done, a la Nigel Mansell, and retire at the British Grand Prix and then 6 months later come back and drive for Williams. Now, I'm not saying he's definitely going to do that, but that is a bit of history repeating itself from 1990. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's got legendary status. Whatever happens, 7 world championships. You're correct in that Ferrari, the Ferrari experience hasn't been as successful as both he and Ferrari would have wanted. You're absolutely right. But, he's had, the legacy is there. Father Time catches up with everybody. And, other than Fernando Alonso, by all accounts. But, the age will take effect. Lewis will have other plans. We know his charitable work is huge, and what he does with Mission 44 and young people and bringing them through into engineering and things. We've also got his fashion, and it was the Met Gala. He's there with all the celebs and all the people. The only one I know was Joe Burrow that was there, and Justin Jefferson. But other than that, they're NFL players. If you're watching this and don't know, but he's got other projects on. I can't see him staying in the F1 paddock. I can't see him doing media work and things. But it would be a loss. But actually, what a way to say farewell here at the British Grand Prix and announce the retirement there. It's something to be seen. Will it affect Ferrari this weekend, though? I mean, how do you think they're going to fare?
I mean, there's always a big part of me that wants Ferrari to do well, and it's a bit delusional in the fact that it'll all come good at some point and we'll see it again. And like I say, I really thought Lewis was going to be that guy. And like I say, Father Time might have caught up and this is it. I always feel like they're going to do well. They're 2 incredibly talented drivers. Charles Leclerc has got world titles in him and possibly should have had one by now if Ferrari were in a better spot. So I feel like they're going to do well. I mean, in my predictions, I haven't got them on a podium, but still up there and fighting.
We will come to predictions a little bit later on, but I think the Canadian Grand Prix circuit is going to suit the Ferrari a little bit more. Certainly by the time they get to Monaco, which is the next race in a couple of weeks, I think that is going to be where Ferrari, particularly with that uber quick start, is going to help them. Charles Leclerc is, I still believe, the quickest driver over one single lap, although he's being challenged by Kimi Antonelli for that mantle at the moment. And it'll be, I think the trouble with Ferrari is they're very Italian. And I love the Italians. I love Italy. I love spending time there. But the problem is distractions affect them. And if Lewis retirement talk is there, that is going to get into the psyche of not only Lewis, but also the team, the Italian press, and that might absorb for what's going to be a difficult weekend because it's a sprint weekend. There's a massively limited amount of development time. Yet again, you get that 1 hour free practice session before you're straight into sprint qualifying. So it's going to be difficult for Ferrari to manage that expectation. They're very, very careful about their brand. Their media management is incredibly close and incredibly tight. So that's going to be incredibly interesting to see.
Yeah.
Another team, and we're not doing this in reverse order as we've done before. We're going to just kind of focus on some of the highlights. But another team that I do want to discuss is Mercedes. Now, Mercedes are coming off the back of an incredibly good run. Kimi Antonelli, the only driver and the youngest driver to have got the 3 poles and the wins, the youngest driver ever to have got those back to back. He's still a teenager, but Mercedes this time round, we've got updates to the car. How do you think that might affect?
Yeah, I think they're getting to a point of needing it. I mean, we saw the grid catch up a bit in Miami. Obviously, like we've said before, not a real test of a circuit, but George didn't have a great weekend there. Kimi just seems to be insanely fast wherever he goes, whatever he's driving. I think the rest of the grid will be worried that they're gonna pull away and open that gap up again. I do think George Russell will make a bit of a comeback. Is that something you agree with?
Yes, I absolutely think George is going to be better here. We know he's got history here, positive history here. He's won the Canadian Grand Prix, and there's been some articles recently that George won't be feeling the pressure. We know George has been a lot more relaxed, seems a lot more relaxed. He is under pressure. You've got a teenager suddenly wanting to, suddenly performing incredibly well. The updates are going to be the interesting bit for me because we know back in 2022 when the new set of regs came in, Mercedes openly admitted, or it was obvious on the track, that their data correlation from what they were getting from the wind tunnel and what they were getting from their design team didn't translate to the circuit very well. Now, other teams have brought updates. The updates are even more critical with the cost cap because the transport cost of updates are included in the cost cap now. So it's very, very difficult. They really have to judge and kind of group the updates all together to limit the cost and limit the. And I think for me, that's going to be the interesting bit. And with the very limited practice time, because the tradition is, you put some updates on the car. If they haven't worked, well, then in free practice 2, you take them off and you run, and then you compare against the 2 sessions to see what you've got. And then you've got 3 practice 3 to kind of get it all nailed together before you put it all on the track and go to qualifying. Well, we don't have that this weekend. And you've got this issue whereby they're going to have to, and I wouldn't be surprised if they may do a bit of a split running. You put some updates on one car, some on the other, but that gets into, are the drivers' styles the same? Does that the same? It's hard. So Mercedes have got themselves in quite an interesting position. I'm not saying it's going to be critically difficult. They're not saying all of a sudden they're going to be challenging Aston Martin and Cadillac for the rear row of the grid at all. But is it going to work? I think that's going to be an interesting storyline to see what happens.
Yeah, I think they're at such a great point where even if these upgrades don't do what they want, they can very quickly, after free practice 1, take them off and just take it into the next weekend. I think they do need to split their upgrades across both drivers, but then you get into a political game of which driver gets what. You start getting into the preference game, which I think is early to be showing your hand on what driver you want to win a world title. I mean, we've seen it pretty historically in Mercedes. It's been quite clear who number 1 and number 2 is. I think at the minute it's pretty blurred. I think coming into the season, George Russell, for me, was going to be number 1, but Antonelli's proved that he probably should be
leading the world championship at the moment.
Yeah, and you don't get there without being good. I mean, obviously we've seen, I think Bottas for maybe 1 round was leading the world championship. He was never going to be number 1. So
shocking that you say that.
Yeah, I mean he's kind of number 1 at Cadillac now, to a point. not that they're going to be winning any world titles anytime soon. But yeah, how do you see that working out?
Well, for me, there's a couple of teams like that. When I was growing up watching sport, there was often one driver that led the way, and that came about from the season in 1988 at McLaren and then 1989, where you had the best two drivers in the world who fought it out, and it ended in tears inevitably. I'm talking Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost in McLaren, and I'm sure you know the history. I know a lot of the viewers will know the history. And then traditionally, you started to see teams actually change focus. Instead of having the best two at the top, actually you have a number one and you have a number two, and you focus on that number one. And the lead example off the back of that was you had Nigel Mansell and you had Riccardo Patrese in the Williams supporting, and that kind of went on. You have Michael Schumacher with those great number twos. Your Rubens Barrichello, Felipe Massa, Fernando Alonso has been in that situation. Red Bull got into a bit of a grey area with Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel before it came very clear that Vettel was the number one. Mercedes do not want to get themselves into the position that Mercedes got themselves into in 2016, where you had two drivers, both incredibly quick, both incredibly impressive, but it ended in tears and Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton hitting each other, and Nico actually prevailed, but it took so much out of Nico. Literally the next day he handed his notice in to Toto, and that was it. He was gone. And that just was, again, we go back to Lewis Hamilton briefly. It goes to show how good Lewis was, and it took everything Nico could do to beat him. And he did beat him, and he beat him fair and square. But, and I know there'll be people now that will say, well, it wasn't because of this race and this race, and Lewis could have, there's always, in any sport, there's always a what could have been. But he did. He beat him. And I think Mercedes will have learned from that you probably do need to have a little bit of a focus. So I suppose going back to your question, what do I think? I think there's another team that are potentially in that problem, and we saw it come to a head in Canada not that long ago. And we talk about that team in papaya, or orange, as it should be called, because papaya always reminds me of those paprika crisps, doesn't it? I suppose that's why that's why they call it that. But McLaren, two drivers, both given equal billing, both incredibly quick. Canadian Grand Prix, not that long ago, they came together on that start-finish line, and it didn't work for either of them, and Lando particularly coming off pretty badly out of that. I think McLaren are going to be the team to watch this weekend because you've got the two drivers. The car is clearly getting better. They had a much better fairing in Miami, as we both said they probably would. You're going to a circuit that's going to suit the car, but you've got a Lando Norris who desperately, and I think Lando has kind of been outperformed by Oscar so far this season. I don't know your view, but you've got Lando who desperately needs to get back on it, and Oscar who is really trying to right the wrongs of last season and not getting there for the championship. I mean, McLaren for me is going to be the interesting one to watch.
Yeah, and going back to Canada last year, I mean, obviously they collide. Norris doesn't finish. I think Piastri ended up fourth in that race, and they extended the title, the lead he had in the championship. That, I think for me, there wasn't that clear number one last year, which is why those issues started happening, and it carried on throughout the year. I think, a bit controversially, I was more on the Piastri side. I thought Piastri should have been number one, and I do think he will do incredibly well. I mean, the other rumour of this break in races has been him potentially going to Red Bull, which we can get on to in a minute. But
I have got to ask then, are we going to see you? Now you've opened that Pandora's box of saying Oscar Piastri fan. In the shop, we've got Oscar Piastri team kit. Are we going to see you wearing an Oscar Piastri t-shirt next time?
If he finishes in the podium, wherever it is, I will be head to toe in papaya. I'll even find some papaya crowd.
Right. Holding him to it for next time, folks. If Oscar Piastri's on the podium, Alastair is going to wear Oscar Piastri kit, and you're going to run the new Heritage Track Trail in that Oscar Piastri kit, aren't you? That's the deal. If Oscar Piastri's there, you are going to run it, and we'll film it. We'll be out there with Maddie and the team, and we'll film it, and you're going to run it in Oscar Piastri kit if he's on the podium. You've heard it here, folks, and we will follow it up next week. Excellent. Great. Well done. Thank you for offering that.
think you embellished a little bit of things there. I think the hardest part of that for me will be running the Heritage Track Trail.
You running the Heritage Track Trail. We'll have some water stops on the way round. We're in this big room. Maybe I didn't hear everything you said, but yeah, Oscar Piastri kit is available in our shop, and Alastair will be sporting it if Oscar Piastri finishes up on the podium. Excellent. So I've digressed a little bit. So you think this is going to be the race where Oscar's going to make the comeback? Clearly.
Yeah.
We're now hoping Oscar's going to make the comeback.
I've now just outed myself as a massive Oscar Piastri fan, which is not what I was expected to do this morning. I think he is the star of McLaren for me. I think Lando, obviously, he's a world champion. You can never argue with that. They're just two number one drivers. If they're in separate teams, they'd both be number one drivers. I think Oscar will lead the charge. I wouldn't be surprised if we did see him up there. Now I'm going to regret it. I think he'll be good. I do think he'll be good. I don't think he'll challenge for a win because I don't know what that'll end up doing to me. I'll probably end up with a tattoo or something. No,
yeah. Well, that we're going to, if he finishes first or second in the championship, maybe that's yeah. Oscar Piastri's face on your arm.
I mean, there could be worse things to put on my arm, I guess.
Yeah. Oscar Piastri's arm on your face would be slightly worse, wouldn't it? Yeah,
definitely. I've lost my train of thought now.
Okay, so I'm going to bring you back a little bit then. I'm going to try and pull it back a little bit. I've just got this image of you with Oscar Piastri's arm on your cheek. Red Bull. I want to talk Red Bull. There's been a huge amount about Max in the media this week, all about the Nürburgring 24-hour race, which is coming up, the preparation he's doing, and we will come on to kind of endurance racing very soon. So obviously we're getting into the realm of the Le Mans 24-hour in the not too distant future. For me, this is one of the races where I think we're going to see Red Bull come back. I think Isaac Hadjar had a torrid weekend in Miami, and he will be wanting to come back with a bang. He has taken the challenge to Max really well, and my prediction is Red Bull are going to podium this weekend, and I will run the track trail in Red Bull kit if you want me to. We could both be running it if you want me to. But I really predict Red Bull are going to be back with it. I think it's a circuit they know well. Max, we know, is a past winner there. They've been getting better every week, but I think it's been under the radar and it's all been taken away. Max did a great psychological job saying, if you like this new era of regulations, you're not really a fan. And he took a lot of the emphasis away of focusing on Red Bull, and it's allowed them to get on and do their job. Yes, there's the headline figures. They've lost GP, they've lost Jonathan Wheatley, they've lost Adrian Newey, all of that, Helmut Marko. They have. What they haven't lost is that fantastic team in Milton Keynes, that fantastic technical base. There's a bit of work they've got to do on the engine side of things, but Canada will give them the opportunity, I think, with the type of circuit, to actually come back with a bit of a bang.
Yeah, Cream always rises to the top. He is an obscenely good driver. If he sticks in F1 and doesn't go away because of these regulations, he would be in the shout for being the greatest of all time. I mean, that might be a bit of a claim with some of the drivers we've seen, but I'm personally, I do quite like him. I hope for my sake and my running ability that he does do very well, that we see two Mercedes and Max Verstappen on the podium. I will get this out there. Sprint podiums don't count. This is main race only.
Okay, yeah, okay, we'll stick to that. We'll stick to main race only for this one, Alastair. But maybe one.
You don't want to know what I'll do when we're at Silverstone. That'll be pretty messy.
Okay. So we'll stick to you running around if Oscar goes, but it's main race only, not the sprints. But let's hope Oscar does well in the sprint because it will bode well for the races as well. But yeah, Red Bull for me are one of the teams I think we're going to potentially see a little bit of a resurgence, shall we say, in that, and that's going to be interesting. Now we have got a Canadian driver on the grid in a team that's been struggling somewhat. How is the Canadian driver on the grid going to do? How is Lance Stroll going to do?
How do I say this? I don't think being Canadian will save it for him. I think that might be quite harsh, but it's obviously being a hometown. He will know that place like the back of his hand. He will know it well. But the car just isn't there for him. I think if Alonso can't do well in it, then Stroll probably also can't do well in it. He's performed well in the past, and he has had good races. And I think he'll be better there than he would be anywhere else, and he might outperform Alonso. But I still can't see a points finish.
You're saying if Lance Stroll gets in the points, you'll run the entire Grand Prix circuit dressed in an Aston Martin kit. You're making it worse for yourself. It's terrible. I think, it's going to be difficult. Aston Martin getting the double finish last time out, there's clearly that vibration issue is becoming sorted. They're a team that haven't brought a lot of upgrades. I have heard rumours, because we often see and speak to team members, that the big upgrade and the big step is going to be Spa, which is a long way into the season. But, let's face it, we know they're not going to win the World Championship this year. And I think they are all going to be eyeing those upgrades and taking those upgrades to that point. And we mentioned Lance Stroll is a home Grand Prix for him. There will be that extra bit of pressure. There always is. But it's unlikely that we're going to see Aston Martin, unfortunately, being up the top of the tree this weekend. Couple of others just to mention. Williams. We've talked about a lot. They are everyone's second favourite team, if we're honest. We're sitting in amongst a couple of Williams cars here. They've had that car that we talked about last time, and James Vowles very cleverly saying, look, we could take the weight off, but we need to not only take the weight off, we need to improve those components and then bring them in lighter. So the car is going to be heavy until they get that set of that set of upgrades. But good showing last time out. Good history at the Canadian Grand Prix. How do you think Alex Albon and Carlos might fare?
It's boding well. It's trending in the right way. They will get there. They are obviously a massive part of F1, and like I say, everyone's second favourite team. The history behind them shows that they will come good at some point. Whether those two drivers are the ones that will lead them on going forward is to be seen. I could see something good. Bold prediction would be a double point finish. Maybe one of the top five if I was going crazy.
Excellent. Well, there'll be a lot of people willing that on. Just going to briefly touch on a couple of the other teams. I know we're a little bit tighter for time this morning, but Haas. Okay. One of the things I think might be a distraction is we've discussed the Lewis retirement, which will be the massive news. Ollie Behrman, is he the natural successor to Lewis at Ferrari? We know there are obviously the Ferrari links. We know he had that outstanding debut for Ferrari at the in Saudi Arabia when Carlos was unable to drive a few years ago, which led to his seat at Haas. We know Haas and Ferrari are inexorably linked in a lot of what they do. That might be a bit of a distraction for a team that really needs to focus. It's not had a bad start to the season. But what do you think? Ollie Behrman in the Ferrari, is that a possibility?
Yeah, he's the heir to the throne. He will be the man to take that forward. He's an incredible driver, and if he's in a uber competitive car, I do think the sky's the limit for him. I've got quite a soft spot for him. I do really like it. I think for me there shouldn't be much of a distraction. I think if I was him, in my mind, it's fairly obvious that that's where he's going. So I'm hoping that can kind of squash anything that could get into his head, and he can just keep focusing on now and how good that car is and things he can do. His teammate, obviously not living up to Ollie's expectations, but do you think he'll do well?
Esteban, he's a solid driver, and the opportunity arises, he's going to get there. Just to return to Ollie very briefly, Silverstone Museum over the Grand Prix weekend is going to be having a lot of we are going to be the sole place that is selling the Ollie Behrman merchandise. And we've also got a little bit of a treat, which you may not know this, Alastair, but yesterday afternoon I've secured the car that it all started for, Ollie Behrman, the Formula 4 car, and it's going to be here at the museum as of Friday and across the summer. So we've got Ollie Behrman's Formula 4 car here. There's a great story to that car, and his dad buying it after Ollie, Van Amersfoort Racing, that were running Ollie, and then the car gets sold on, and his dad managed to buy it back, and it's with the team, and that's going to be back with us, or it's going to be here with us as of Friday. So it's a new exhibit here, Ollie Behrman exhibit. Really excited to have that here. We're going to be talking Ollie Behrman a little bit in a few weeks' time, I'm sure, when we come to our British Grand Prix preview. So that's some exciting news to have that.
Did not know that.
That Formula 5. No, you didn't know it. Yeah, it was only sorted yesterday afternoon. So very excited about that. Alpine have had a great start. So last time out, Pierre Gasly really good. Colapinto, Pierre Gasly great in the beginning of the Grand Prix weekend. Obviously had that flip over and didn't end so well. Colapinto in the points. They've clearly got a car that's pretty good. Local team. Looking forward to seeing what they can do.
Yeah. It turned this weekend upside down. Yeah. Like that.
No. That is a deliberate deadpan face at that point. It's all right. No problem. Leave you hanging. Yeah.
I like them. I think they've got a good pairing of drivers. I think they're in a bit of a developmental stage, and I hope that they can keep developing that car and start getting up there. And I would like to see a different name at the top. I mean, we've had Mercedes and Red Bull for donkeys of years. Ferrari's been there forever and will always be there. McLaren obviously dipped and came back. I'd hope to see Alpine back at the top.
See, I would argue Alpine have been at the top, but this is where I think I'm just going to be a motorsport history geek. But there was a team called Benetton that ran for quite a while, and that team, I believe, have won a couple of world championships in its past as well, with some guy called Michael Schumacher and then some other guy called Fernando Alonso. So I would say they have actually been at the top for a while. The team at Enstone, though, has gone through quite a change, and that big change of moving their engine development. They're basically buying engine in now rather than developing the engine in France and the car in the UK, which never really translated to any kind of progress. But yeah, looking forward to seeing how they get on. And then the final person we're going to talk about is the other British driver on the grid, Arvin Lindblad. I think has had a solid start, and I think the fact that we're not discussing him, and we've discussed his teammate Liam Lawson a little more, we may not have time for that discussion today. I'd love to see you running around the track in a Liam Lawson t-shirt one day. That would be interesting. Liam Lawson's number tattooed is what I'm hearing. That sounds like a great idea.
That might make it up to him after all the bad things I've said in podcast 1 and 2.
I think by the if we continue these, but we're going to carry these podcasts on in a year or two. You're going to be head to toe.
I'm going to have a sleeve on the end of the season.
It's going to be We'll drop a comment. What tattoo do you think Alastair should get? We can even do a live podcast while you're being tattooed with Oscar Piastri's number or whatever we go for. Anyway, we digress a little bit. But yeah, Arvin Lindblad, be great to see him get a result. We've talked about Liam Lawson and the kind of the progress or lack of that he might have made. But it'd be good to see Arvin Lindblad, who has had a very solid start. We've not been talking about him in the negative, which is great. It'd be great to see what he can do.
Yeah, he's one for the future for me. I think the British drivers that we've got coming through is an insanely good fleet of people. He is going to be a future Red Bull driver. Obviously, he's in the driver pathway program or whatever they call it. He will get up there. I think we're going to need to be a little bit patient with him. Like you say, he's steady, which is a great thing for a young driver.
There's a reason I mention him, because if Max does throw it all in this season and move somewhere else, there is potential for, you've got Arvin Lindblad, you've got Liam Lawson, but you've also got Ayumu Iwasa, who's been racing out in Japan. Yuki Tsunoda is still around, is still a potential possibility. And so there will be other drivers. And there is a view to, actually, there might be a big opportunity here. There has been talk of, your best friend, Oscar Piastri, coming into that seat. There was a lot of talk about that the other day. That's died down very rapidly. Potentially spawned by the fact that Mark Webber is Oscar's manager, and obviously Mark had that very incredibly good history at Red Bull, and the links are still there. So there is a little bit of that, but I just wanted to drop Arvin Lindblad in there because there is going to start to be the discussions. If, and it's a big if, Max does decide to step away, even for a year, that seat's going to need to be filled.
The other reason I wanted to mention Arvin Lindblad briefly is if you're here at the museum and want to go on our sims, ask our sim crew. Arvin Lindblad set a lap on our sims in one of the cars, and it's the kind of thing you can have a go at. Have you had a go at beating Arvin Lindblad's time?
I have, and I think I was 15 seconds behind him, and I had an awful time on it. I do not have the pace, and it showed me that I will never ever make it as a racing driver. But there is a few people that work here that have been close. There's someone that we're going to introduce called the Twig. That's our take on the Stig that you won't know about yet, but he is mighty fast.
Hang on, who's giving you permission to start saying we can introduce things? I'm the one that introduces things, like you running around the track. I also heard our producer Richard, who's a bit of a good race driver, certainly in karting. He had a go on the sims at the weekend, and he did come in on Monday and say, actually, Rob, you were 3 seconds quicker than me, and I'm not that quick. But anyway, I just wanted to drop that in because Richard's here listening to everything we're doing, and he's doing a cracking job with all the new kit we've got and producing this episode. So at this rate, I'm never going to be allowed back into the show I created.
I think the thing I maybe shouldn't mention, might regret mentioning, is he was 5 seconds quicker than me on the Sims, so that means you're 8 seconds quicker than me.
Brilliant. I'll race you any day, you. Tell you what, we'll race around the Heritage Track Trail and see who's quicker at that as well.
Hammer me.
Okay. Alastair, this has been great. It's been good fun, and really enjoyed this. I hope you're enjoying the content at home. Now, we are going to run a brief composition, and in honour of Alastair's new favourite driver, Oscar Piastri, if you can answer this question, we will send you a McLaren hat. We will select one person, and we will send a McLaren hat. And the question is, which Grand Prix did Oscar Piastri make his Formula One debut? So which Grand Prix did Oscar Piastri make his Formula One debut? Drop the answer in the comments box below, and we will pick one winner, and we will send them. We'll get in touch with you, and we'll send you an Oscar Piastri hat, and that's in honour of Alastair and him. If Oscar Piastri gets on the podium this week, he will be running the Heritage Track Trail in Oscar Piastri and McLaren kit. He said head to toe, so we will hold him to. I don't know where he's going to get some McLaren socks from, but we'll look forward to finding that out. Really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Grab a like, grab a subscribe. We will be back next week with a review of the Canadian Grand Prix, the sprint race this weekend. Enjoy all the content. From me, from Alastair, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.